I stepped onto the set at Sun Valley Studios that Monday morning, the familiar buzz of Hollywood chaos wrapping around me like a second skin. As a Black woman in my 40s, I'd grown used to the subtle undercurrents in places like this, where my presence often raised eyebrows before I even opened my mouth. The independent film we were shooting was just ramping up, with cameras being rigged for the first big scene. Crew members darted back and forth, assistants barking orders about props, and the lead actors lounging in makeup trailers nearby. I adjusted my black button-up shirt, tugged my baseball cap lower, and slipped on my headphones, clipboard in hand. My role demanded precision, so I made my way to a quiet corner of the set, scanning the camera positions, lighting rigs, and storyboards. Everything had to align perfectly. Spotting the reflector panel near the props area, I lifted it gently, tilting it to check the angle against the planned shot. It was off, just a hair, but enough to cause glare issues later. Before I could set it down, a tall man strode over, arms crossed, his face twisted in annoyance. He looked like he owned the place, probably the assistant director. "Hey, lady," he snapped. "This is the tech zone. Who the hell gave you permission to touch the equipment?" I turned calmly, meeting his eyes. "I'm just verifying the reflection angle. It's slightly misaligned with the shot setup." He cut me off, his voice rising. "Reflection? Who are you anyway? Some lighting intern? If you're not on the call sheet for this, know your place and back off the cameras. This is a professional film set, not a playground for wannabes trying to look important." A few crew members nearby paused, turning to watch. I caught a young woman, maybe an intern, whispering to her colleague, "Already stirring up trouble this early?" Her words stung, but I kept my expression neutral, the weight of similar encounters pressing on me. It wasn't the first time my skin color made me an instant suspect in a space like this. I lowered the reflector carefully, but the tension hung in the air, thick and unspoken. He didn't let up, his face flushing with that mix of authority and irritation I'd seen too many times before. Waving his hand toward the security guard stationed at the edge of the set, he barked, "Security! Get over here. I need this woman removed from the shooting area right now. The props are set perfectly, no one's authorized to tamper with them." I tried to interject, keeping my voice steady despite the heat rising in my chest. "I'm not tampering. I was just pointing out." He laughed, a short, dismissive bark that echoed across the bustling set, and cut me off again. "Pointing out? Listen, don't think just because you've wandered onto this lot means you're suddenly part of the creative team. People like you need to stay behind the barriers, where you belong. We have real professionals handling this, not random bystanders pretending to know better." The words "people like you" hung in the air like a slap, laced with the unspoken assumptions I'd faced my whole career: too black, too female, too unassuming to be taken seriously in a world dominated by egos and connections. Around us, the crew's reactions varied, some chuckled under their breath, exchanging knowing glances as if this was just another morning amusement. Others averted their eyes, fiddling with cables or props to avoid getting involved. The young intern who'd whispered earlier now smirked openly, her phone half pulled from her pocket like she was debating whether to record the spectacle. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the exhausting familiarity of it all. In Hollywood, where I'd clawed my way up through years of overlooked talent and outright dismissal, moments like this were tests of restraint. I could feel the weight of their stares, judging me as an intruder rather than the one who'd pored over the storyboards until dawn. But I didn't snap back. Instead, I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to breathe evenly. Reacting now would only feed their narrative, make me the angry black woman they expected. No, I'd learned long ago that silence could be sharper than words, especially when the truth was on my side. The security guard approached hesitantly, glancing between us. "Ma'am, if you could step back." He started, but I held my ground just a moment longer, letting the assistant director's smug expression burn into my memory. I didn't say another word. The security guard hovered awkwardly, his hand gesturing toward the perimeter of the set, but I ignored him for a beat, focusing instead on the reflector still in my grasp. Slowly, deliberately, I set it back exactly where I'd found it, misaligned and all, making sure my movements were calm, unhurried. No rush, no defiance that could be twisted against me. I adjusted my headphones, pulling the cord slightly to ensure they sat right, and took a single step back, crossing my arms over my clipboard. Inside, the storm raged, years of being sidelined, diminished, erased in rooms full of people who saw my skin before my skills. But on the outside? Nothing. No outburst, no tears, no pleading. I'd learned that game long ago. Reacting hot only fueled their fire, confirmed their biases. Instead, I met the assistant director's gaze head-on. My eyes weren't filled with fear or rage, they were cool, steady, like still water hiding depths he couldn't fathom. It was the look of someone who'd been here before, who knew the script would flip eventually. I held it just long enough to let him feel the weight of his own words echoing back at him, unspoken but clear. "You have no idea what's coming." He shifted uncomfortably, his smugness cracking for a split second, but he recovered quickly, turning to the guard. "Escort her out if she doesn't move," he muttered, waving dismissively as if I were a fly buzzing too close. The crew around us resumed their tasks, some stealing glances, others whispering in low tones that carried just enough to sting. "What was that about?" one said. "Probably thought she could just waltz in and fix things," another replied with a chuckle. I finally turned away, walking toward the outer edge of the set without a backward glance. But as I did, I noticed the secondary camera rig nearby, its red light blinking steadily. It had been rolling the whole time, capturing the exchange in crisp detail, his interruptions, the laughter, my quiet retreat. A small smile tugged at the corner of my lips, hidden under the brim of my cap. Evidence like that? It was gold in a place like this. The day was young, and so was the truth waiting to unfold. After the assistant director's dismissal and the security guard's half-hearted nudge, I retreated to the outer fringes of the set, my clipboard clutched like a shield. The morning sun beat down on the asphalt lot, but the real heat came from the simmering humiliation bubbling inside me. I'd been through this dance before, too many times to count, in boardrooms, on previous sets, even at industry events where my credentials were questioned before my name was asked. But each time, it chipped away a little more, reminding me that in this glittering world of make-believe, my reality as a black woman often cast me as the outsider, the intruder, the one who had to prove her right to exist. The crew dove back into their routines as if the interruption had been nothing more than a minor glitch in the schedule. Cables were coiled, lights adjusted, ironically, without touching the reflector I'd flagged, and voices rose in the familiar rhythm of pre-shoot chatter. I lingered just close enough to overhear, my headphones dangling around my neck, pretending to review notes on my clipboard. That's when the whispers started, slithering through the air like smoke. One of the lighting techs, a wiry guy in his 30s with a faded band tee under his vest, leaned toward his buddy while fiddling with a gel filter. "Did you see that? She thinks she's hot stuff, waltzing in and touching the rigs like she owns them." Probably some wannabe trying to score a gig by looking busy. His partner snorted, wiping sweat from his brow. Yeah, or maybe she's just somebody's mom from the office, tagging along and thinking she can play director. Bold move, tweaking the angles like that. Who does she think she is, Spielberg? Their laughter was low but sharp, cutting through the hum of generators. A few others nearby joined in with nods and eye rolls, their glances flicking my way before darting off. No one stepped up to defend me, not the intern who'd smirked earlier, not the sound guy who'd witnessed the whole exchange. They all knew what had happened, had seen me publicly dressed down, but it was easier to pile on, to turn me into the punchline rather than question the assistant director's snap judgment. I felt that familiar isolation wrap around me like a fog, thick and suffocating. In Hollywood, black women like me were often relegated to the shadows, assistants, background players, rarely the ones calling the shots unless we'd fought tooth and nail for it. Today was no different. I was the anomaly they couldn't place, so they diminished me to fit their narrative. My fingers tightened on the clipboard, but I didn't move. Let them talk. Words like theirs had built my resolve over the years, turned it into armor. And deep down, I knew the truth would surface soon enough, sharper than any whisper. As the crew wrapped their prep, the assistant director barked more orders, oblivious to the undercurrent he'd stirred. I stayed put, watching, waiting for the inevitable crack in their perfect setup. As the morning wore on, the set hit its first break, a brief respite where everyone scattered to grab coffee or water from the craft services table tucked under a canopy at the edge of the lot. The air smelled of stale donuts and fresh brew, mingling with the faint tang of generator exhaust. I lingered nearby, my clipboard still in hand, pretending to jot notes while keeping an eye on the crew. The whispers from earlier lingered in my mind, a reminder that silence didn't erase the sting, it just postponed the reckoning. But I'd played this long game before, in meetings where my ideas were dismissed only to be rediscovered by someone else, on sets where my expertise was questioned until proven undeniable. I spotted a young camera operator, early 20s, lanky with a backpack slung over one shoulder, pouring himself a cup at the water station. He looked approachable, less jaded than the veterans trading jokes nearby. I approached casually, filling a paper cup for myself. "Tough setup today, huh?" I said, keeping my tone light, conversational. He glanced up, nodding with a half-smile. "Yeah, first day jitters. Everything's gotta be spot on, or the AD will chew us out." I took a sip, then nodded toward the reflector rig in the distance. "That reflector's off by about 15 degrees. If the main camera pans according to the storyboard, it'll hit the third actor's face with glare, right around the 27-second mark. Might cause a squint or worse." He paused, his cup halfway to his lips, eyebrows knitting together. "Wait, really?" "The lighting team signed off on it. AD said to leave it as is." I shrugged, not pushing too hard. "Just something to watch for. Don't be surprised if it forces a cut midway through. I've seen it happen on tighter shoots." He scratched his head, glancing back at the set with a flicker of doubt. "Huh. I'll keep an eye on it. Thanks, I guess." His voice trailed off, laced with uncertainty, as if weighing whether to dismiss me like the others had. I nodded once and stepped away, leaving him there with his cooling coffee and budding questions. Inside, I felt a quiet satisfaction, not vindication yet, but the first thread unraveling in their assumptions. Reminding them gently wasn't about proving myself right then, it was about planting seeds that would sprout when the inevitable happened. In my career, I'd learned that subtle nudges often spoke louder than shouts, especially when the system was rigged to ignore voices like mine. As a black woman navigating Hollywood's hierarchies, I'd turned patience into a weapon, waiting for the moment when facts overrode bias. Walking back to my spot on the periphery, I adjusted my cap, ready for the afternoon's unraveling. As the lunch break wrapped up and the afternoon sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the lot, the set buzzed back to life. I positioned myself at a safe distance, close enough to observe without drawing more ire, my clipboard serving as both prop and barrier. The lead actors emerged from their trailers, scripts in hand, while the crew fine-tuned the last details. The assistant director paced like a general, barking, "Positions, everyone. Let's nail this on the first take. No excuses." The cameras rolled, the slate clapped, and the scene unfolded, a tense dialogue exchange in the mock office setup. I watched intently, my eyes fixed on the main camera's pan as it followed the storyboard arc. Right on cue, at the 27-second mark, the reflector caught the light wrong, blasting a harsh glare straight into the supporting actress's face. She winced, shielding her eyes midline, her delivery stumbling as she broke character. The whole take crumbled. "Cut," the assistant director's voice thundered, his face reddening. He stormed toward the lighting rig, hands on hips. What the hell was that? Glare on the third mark? Who screwed up the reflector setup? This was checked this morning. The crew shifted uneasily, murmurs rippling through them. One of the techs, the same guy who'd mocked me earlier, glanced around before muttering to his partner, "Told you it looked off." But it was the young camera operator I'd spoken to who piped up, hesitantly at first. Someone mentioned it during break. That woman from earlier, she said it'd hit at 15 degrees off and cause exactly this." The assistant director whirled on him. "What woman? The one fiddling with it this morning? Great, now we're listening to randos?" But doubt flickered in his eyes as he scanned the monitors, replaying the take. The glare was undeniable, a rookie mistake that could have been avoided. Unbeknownst to them, the secondary camera, positioned for behind-the-scenes footage, had captured it all: my initial adjustment attempt, the confrontation, and me stepping back. Its lens had documented the misalignment persisting after I'd been shooed away. I felt a quiet surge of vindication, not glee, but the steady affirmation that facts didn't discriminate, even if people did. Standing there, arms crossed, I watched the chaos unfold, knowing this small glitch was the crack that would widen. In Hollywood, where egos eclipsed expertise, moments like this reminded me why I'd fought to be here, not for applause, but for the shot to speak for itself. The assistant director called for resets, but the seed of questioning had taken root, and I waited, patient as ever. After the third botched take, the set descended into frustrated chaos. The supporting actress rubbed her eyes, muttering about the glare ruining her focus, while the lead actor paced impatiently, script flapping in his hand. I stood at my vantage point on the periphery, arms crossed, watching it all unfold with a quiet sense of inevitability. The sun had shifted, making the misaligned reflector even more glaring, literally. Whispers among the crew grew louder, fingers pointing subtly toward the lighting rig as if it had betrayed them personally. The assistant director exploded, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a whip. "Cut. Again? This is unacceptable. Who's on lighting duty today? That reflector is throwing glare right into the frame, exactly where it shouldn't. We prepped this setup hours ago. Someone explain why it's still screwed up." He stormed across the set, kicking a stray cable out of his path, his face a mask of fury. The lighting techs exchanged nervous glances, one of them, the same guy who'd mocked me earlier, shrugging helplessly. "We followed the marks from this morning, boss. It looked fine in tests." "Fine? 3 resets and we're burning daylight because of fine?" The AD whirled on the group, his eyes scanning for a scapegoat. That's when the young camera operator I'd spoken to stepped forward tentatively, his voice barely above the hum of the generators. Sir? This morning, someone tried to adjust it. Said it'd be off by 15 degrees and cause exactly this issue. But she got pushed back." The AD's head snapped toward him. "Someone? Who?" His tone dripped with sarcasm, as if the idea was absurd. The operator hesitated, glancing my way. "That woman over there, the one in the black shirt. She mentioned it during break too." All eyes turned to me then, a wave of realization mixed with discomfort rippling through the crew. The AD's expression darkened, his jaw clenching as he zeroed in on me like a target. "Her? The one fiddling with props uninvited? And now she's still lurking around, playing expert?" He marched closer, pointing a finger accusingly. "This delay is on you, isn't it? Stirring up trouble from the start. I want her off this set, permanently. Security. Escort her out. We don't need amateurs sabotaging the shoot." The security guard from earlier approached again, looking even more reluctant this time, but the AD wasn't done. "People like her think they can just insert themselves anywhere. Get her gone before she costs us more time." Inside, I felt the familiar burn of injustice, the way these moments always amplified the biases I'd navigated my whole career. But I didn't flinch. I met his gaze steadily, my clipboard steady in my hands, knowing this escalation was the prelude to the reveal. The crew watched in tense silence, the air thick with anticipation, and for some, perhaps the first twinge of doubt. The tension on the set thickened like humidity before a storm, the kind that made every sound feel amplified, the low hum of the generators, the shuffle of feet, the occasional clink of equipment being adjusted. The assistant director stood there, chest heaving from his outburst, his finger still jabbing toward me as if I were the source of every delay. Security lingered a few steps away, unsure whether to advance or wait for a clearer order. I stayed rooted in place, my expression unchanged, letting the moment stretch. Inside, my pulse thrummed steadily, not panic, but the calm that comes from knowing the tide was about to turn. I'd spent enough years in this industry to recognize the exact point when doubt began to erode certainty. That's when Luis stepped forward. He was the young production assistant I'd noticed earlier, mid-20s, always carrying a tablet and a nervous energy that made him seem perpetually on the verge of apologizing. He'd been hovering near the monitors all morning, watching everything unfold with wide eyes. Now he cleared his throat, his voice tentative but audible enough to cut through the murmurs. Sir, maybe we should double-check before we, remove anyone," he said, glancing between the AD and me. I saw her with what looked like the main storyboard earlier. Not the old one, the updated version. The one with the revised lighting notes from last week's revisions. The AD spun toward him, eyes narrowing. "Updated? What are you talking about?" "Only the director and I have the latest draft. Nobody else got that file." "Where the hell would she get it?" Louis swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. I'm not sure, but she had it open on her tablet when she was looking at the reflector. It matched the notes we got yesterday, the ones about adjusting the angle for the third actor's close-up." I thought maybe the director sent it to her directly? A ripple of unease spread through the crew. The lighting tech who'd laughed at me earlier shifted his weight, suddenly interested in his shoelaces. The intern who'd whispered during the initial confrontation now stared openly, her phone forgotten in her hand. Even the actors paused their pacing, leaning in slightly, sensing the shift. Whispers started again, but this time they weren't mocking, they were questioning. The AD's face flushed deeper, a mix of anger and uncertainty. That's impossible. The director's in New York for the conference. He wouldn't hand off critical files to some random crew member. He shot me a glare, as if daring me to contradict him. I didn't. I simply stood there, letting the silence do the work. My eyes met Louis's for a brief second. He looked almost apologetic, like he was surprised himself that he'd spoken up. But the damage, or rather, the truth, was spreading. A few crew members exchanged glances, the kind that said, "What if he's right?" The secondary camera, still rolling quietly in the background, captured it all: the AD's faltering confidence, the growing skepticism in the eyes around him, and me, unmoving, unflinching. In that moment, I felt the familiar weight of being underestimated lift just a fraction. Hollywood loved dramatic reveals, but I knew the real power lay in the slow erosion of assumptions. No need for me to speak yet. The questions were doing it for me. The assistant director closed the distance between us, his face inches from mine, his breath hot with frustration and entitlement. "I'm not asking any more," he snarled, his voice carrying across the now hushed set. "You're done here. Pack up whatever delusions brought you onto this lot and get out. We don't tolerate amateurs causing delays, especially ones who think they can play expert without credentials." The crew froze in place, tools halfway adjusted, conversations dying mid-sentence. Security shifted forward, one hand on his radio, ready to comply. I could feel the weight of their stares, some curious, others pitying, a few already dismissing me as the day's casualty. Inside, the familiar ache of being reduced to that woman pulsed through me, a reminder of countless boardrooms and sets where my expertise had been invisible until forced into the light. But I didn't waver. My hands stayed steady on my clipboard, my posture straight. Hollywood had taught me that timing was everything, and this was my cue. Without a word at first, I reached into my pocket, pulling out the hard plastic crew badge I'd kept tucked away all morning. I flipped it over deliberately, holding it up so the embossed text caught the sunlight: Raina Jefferson, Director, Unit 1B. The AD's eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Murmurs rippled through the crew, Louis's face lit up with vindication, the lighting techs exchanged shocked glances, and even the actors leaned in from their marks. I spoke then, my voice calm and measured, cutting through the stunned silence like a well-rehearsed line. "You've cut 3 times now." Still the same lighting glitch. "If you don't believe me, pull up the original storyboard, the updated one. You'll see the reflector note right there, page 7. The words hung in the air, simple but loaded, shifting the entire dynamic in an instant. No theatrics, no raised voice, just the unassailable truth. The AD staggered back a step, his authority crumbling visibly as he fumbled for his own tablet. That can't be right," he stammered, scrolling frantically. "The director didn't authorize." But the crew was already reacting. Whispers turned to open chatter: "She's the director? Unit 1B, that's the whole segment." Louis nodded emphatically, pulling up his own copy of the storyboard to confirm. The secondary camera, still whirring quietly, captured the pivot, the AD's bluster deflating, the crew's skepticism flipping to respect, my quiet stand at the center of it all. In that frozen moment, I felt the release, not triumph, but the quiet power of revelation. As a Black woman in this industry, I'd learned to let actions, and facts, speak louder than indignation. The set hung in suspended animation, every eye on me now, waiting for what came next. The air crackled with the unspoken acknowledgement they'd misjudged, and the real shoot was just beginning. Only a few minutes ticked by after I held up my badge, but it felt like an eternity suspended in that stunned silence. The set had gone eerily quiet, the hum of equipment the only soundtrack to the AD's crumbling facade. He stood there, tablet limp in his hand, scrolling futilely as if the storyboard would somehow rewrite itself to save him. The crew shifted uncomfortably, their earlier whispers now replaced by wide-eyed stares darting between us. Luis looked relieved, like he'd bet on the right horse. The lighting techs averted their eyes, suddenly fascinated by their gear. Even the actors hung back, scripts forgotten, sensing the air had shifted irreversibly. I didn't move, didn't gloat. As a Black woman who'd navigated Hollywood's minefields for 2 decades, I knew revelations like this weren't about personal victory, they were about exposing the rot that let biases fester unchecked. My heart beat steadily, a mix of vindication and weariness. How many times had I been in this spot, waiting for the truth to catch up? Then, the low rumble of an engine cut through the tension. A sleek black SUV glided through the security gate without pause, tires crunching gravel as it pulled up right beside the production area. Heads turned, murmurs starting anew. The door swung open, and out stepped Emma Saldana, the executive producer of the studio, a powerhouse in her 50s, sharp-suited with an aura that commanded rooms without a word. She didn't bother with the guard waving her through, she marched straight onto the set, her heels clicking authoritatively on the asphalt. The crew parted like the Red Sea as she approached, her eyes scanning the frozen tableau. She stopped at the center, right where the AD had confronted me earlier, and crossed her arms. Her voice was ice-cold, cutting through the air. Who exactly ordered Director Jefferson removed from the set? No one answered at first. The AD's face drained of color, his mouth opening soundlessly. Luis swallowed hard, his throat working visibly, but he stayed silent, glancing at me with a mix of awe and nerves. The security guard backed away, pretending to check his radio. Emma's gaze swept the group, landing on the AD like a spotlight. Well, I'm waiting. This production is already behind schedule, and I get reports of delays due to incompetence? I stood there, badge still in hand, my posture unchanged, calm, unflinching. Inside, a quiet satisfaction bloomed, not schadenfreude, but the relief of seeing the system correct itself, however belatedly. Emma's presence amplified everything. She wasn't just my boss, she was the gatekeeper who'd handpicked me for this role, knowing my track record of turning chaotic shoots into gold. The crew held their breath, the secondary camera still rolling discreetly in the background, capturing this pivotal turn. For the first time that day, I felt seen, not as an intruder, but as the director I was. The real confrontation had just begun. Emma didn't wait long for an answer. Her presence alone commanded the set, turning the earlier chaos into a pin-drop silence. She turned slowly, her sharp eyes sweeping over the crew like a director assessing a flawed take. "Let me make this crystal clear," she said, her voice steady and authoritative, carrying without needing to raise it. Raina Jefferson is the director for all scenes in Unit 1B through 1E of this production. I personally assigned her to step in while the main director is at the industry conference in New York. She's not some random interloper, she's the one ensuring this film doesn't fall apart on day one. The words landed like a script rewrite mid-shoot, flipping the narrative in an instant. Gasps rippled through the crew, the lighting techs froze mid-adjustment, their tools dangling forgotten. Luis's eyes widened in a mix of relief and awe, his tablet clutched tightly as if it held the proof. The intern who'd smirked earlier now looked mortified, her phone slipping back into her pocket. Even the actors, who'd been lounging at the edges, straightened up, exchanging glances that screamed, "Did we miss something big?" The assistant director, the man who'd barked orders at me all morning, dismissing me as an unqualified nuisance, went pale, his earlier bluster evaporating like morning fog under the California sun. He stammered, I had no idea. The call sheet didn't list. Emma cut him off with a raised hand, her expression unyielding. The call sheet isn't your excuse for assumptions. Raina's credentials were distributed in the update email last night. If you checked, or better yet, treated everyone with basic respect, you wouldn't be standing here explaining yourself. She stepped back slightly, addressing the entire group now. And let this be a warning, anyone obstructing my director, or any key personnel for that matter, will be blacklisted from this crew, and likely from future projects at this studio. Permanently. We don't tolerate ego-driven disruptions, especially ones rooted in bias. Her gaze lingered on the AD, piercing like a close-up lens exposing every flaw. He shifted uncomfortably, mumbling something about a misunderstanding, but the damage was done. The crew absorbed it all, a subtle shift in posture, shoulders relaxing around me, eyes meeting mine with newfound deference. Inside, I felt a complex swirl, satisfaction at the truth emerging, but also the weary ache of having to endure the ordeal to reach this point. As a Black woman in Hollywood, I'd long ago accepted that my path often required proving myself twice over, but moments like this reaffirmed why I persisted, not for apologies, but for the space to create without barriers. Emma turned to me then, her tone softening just a fraction. Raina, let's get this scene back on track. What's your call on the reflector? I nodded, stepping forward into the circle that had once excluded me, ready to direct. The set hummed back to life, but the air felt different now, charged with accountability. The assistant director, the man who'd spent the morning belittling me, reducing me to an unwelcome shadow on his set, stood there like a statue cracking under its own weight. His face, once flushed with righteous anger, now drained to a ghostly pallor, his mouth working silently as Emma's words echoed in the still air. He clutched his tablet like a lifeline, but it offered no escape. I didn't know, he finally stammered, his voice cracking on the edges. The updates, they must have slipped through. I thought she was just what? Emma interjected, her tone slicing through his excuses like a well-sharpened edit. She stepped closer, her presence towering despite her average height, forcing him to meet her gaze. Just a Black woman in a black shirt who dared to touch the equipment? Just someone you assumed wasn't qualified because she didn't fit your narrow idea of who belongs here? Spare me the justifications. This industry has enough gatekeepers like you holding back real talent. The crew watched in rapt silence, the earlier tension morphing into a collective breath-holding. Luis shifted his weight, his eyes darting to me with a mix of sympathy and admiration. The lighting techs, who'd chuckled at my expense, now busied themselves with unnecessary adjustments, their laughter long forgotten. Even the security guard backed off entirely, melting into the background as if he'd never been summoned. I could feel the shift, the invisible barriers that had boxed me in all day crumbling, replaced by a reluctant respect born from exposure. The AD's shoulders slumped, his authority evaporating in real time. He glanced around desperately, seeking allies in the faces that now avoided his. "I was just trying to keep things on schedule," he muttered weakly, but it sounded hollow, an afterthought to cover the bias he'd wielded like a blunt instrument. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and for a split second, our eyes met, his filled with a dawning panic, mine steady, unflinching. In that look, I saw the flicker of realization. He'd miscalculated, and the cost was mounting. I stepped forward then, into the space he'd once commanded, my voice calm but resonant. "I didn't need anyone to know who I was from the start," I said, addressing him directly but loud enough for the crew to hear. "I just needed the shot to be right, for the sake of the hundreds of real filmmakers here pouring their sweat into this. Not for egos, not for assumptions, but for the work." He had no response, his head dropping as Emma nodded approvingly beside me. The set exhaled collectively, the air lighter now, charged with a new dynamic. In my chest, the knot of frustration loosened, not fully, because these moments always left scars, but enough to breathe freely. As a Black woman who'd fought for every inch in this industry, I knew this wasn't just my win, it was a crack in the system, a reminder that truth, when revealed, reshapes everything. The secondary camera captured it all, a silent witness to the fall. 3 days later, the final scene of segment 1 wrapped with just 2 takes, a far cry from the glitch-riddled mess of that first morning. I stood behind the main monitor, arms crossed, watching the playback one last time. The lighting hit perfectly, no glare, no stumbles, the actors nailed their marks, the camera panned smoothly. As the last frame froze, I gave a single nod, simple, understated, and the crew erupted in applause. Hands clapping, whoops echoing across the lot, a few even cheering my name. "That's a wrap on 1E, someone shouted, but I knew it was more than that. It was validation, hard-earned and overdue. I slipped off my headphones, letting them dangle around my neck, and stepped away from the monitors. The set felt different now, less hostile, more collaborative. I walked slowly toward the center of the shooting area, the very spot where, 3 days ago, I'd been dismissed like an unwelcome pest, shooed away amid laughter and whispers. The asphalt under my feet was the same, the rigs and cables unchanged, but the air hummed with a new respect. As I moved, the crew parted instinctively, creating a path without a word. No one blocked me. Instead, they stepped aside, some nodding subtly, others offering small smiles of acknowledgement. The lighting tech who'd mocked me averted his eyes, busying himself with coiling a cord. The intern stood frozen, her earlier smirk replaced by wide-eyed silence. Even the actors paused their post-shoot chatter, watching me pass. I didn't need apologies, though none came anyway. Words like that often rang hollow in Hollywood, where actions spoke louder than regrets. I walked through them quietly, steadily, my chin up, clipboard tucked under my arm. On the surface, I moved as if untouched, unscathed by the humiliation that had kicked off this whirlwind. But deep down, the memory lingered, a quiet scar, a reminder of the biases I'd dismantled, one precise adjustment at a time. They all knew now. I could see it in their averted gazes, the way the space opened for me. They'd been wrong, spectacularly so, and in that parting of the crowd, I felt the weight of it shift from my shoulders to theirs. As I reached the edge of the set, the applause faded behind me, but the echo of change lingered. In my career as a Black woman director, moments like this weren't triumphs to celebrate, they were necessities, proof that persistence could rewrite even the most stubborn scripts. I kept walking, toward the next segment, leaving the past where it belonged, exposed and corrected. Louis sat alone in the break area after wrap, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the scattered folding chairs and half-empty water bottles. I'd noticed him earlier, lingering at the edges as the crew dispersed, his tablet glowing in his lap. From where I stood packing my things nearby, clipboard into my bag, headphones coiled neatly, I could see him replaying the footage from the secondary camera. The video that had captured it all, the initial confrontation, the AD's dismissals, my quiet retreat. He paused it at the moment our eyes met, mine calm, unflinching, and shook his head slowly. Everyone laughed then, he muttered to himself, his voice low but carrying in the quieting lot. But she just looked. No one thought that look would change the whole crew in 3 days. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair, the weight of the realization evident in his slumped shoulders. As a young PA, he'd probably seen his share of set politics, but this one hit different, exposing the quick judgments that poisoned the air. I didn't interrupt, I just watched, a quiet observer to the ripple I'd started. Luis tapped his screen a few times, pulling up the crew's internal group chat. His fingers hovered before typing, "Respect isn't because she's the director. It's because she was right from the start." He attached a clip of the video, the part showing the reflector glitch and my ignored warning, then hit send. Notifications pinged softly on nearby phones as crew members checked their devices, the message spreading like a subtle wave. Inside, I felt a warmth spread, not pride exactly, but affirmation. In my years as a Black woman director, I'd learned that real change often came through others' eyes, not just my own battles. Luis's words echoed what I'd fought for, recognition based on merit, not assumptions. He glanced up, catching my eye across the way, and offered a small nod, respectful, genuine. I nodded back, slinging my bag over my shoulder. As I walked toward my car, the day's events replayed in my mind. The humiliation had stung, but moments like this healed the edges. Luis's quiet reflection wasn't just commentary, it was the beginning of a shift, one that might make the next set a little less hostile for someone like me. Hollywood moved slow, but seeds like these took root, growing into something enduring. A week later, as I scrolled through my phone during a quiet evening in my Los Angeles apartment, the studio's official page popped up in my feed. There it was, the first behind-the-scenes poster for the film, splashed across their social media with hashtags like #OnSetMagic and #IndieFilmLife. The image captured me mid-stride on the set, baseball cap pulled low, storyboard clutched in one hand, standing tall beside the massive camera rig. The crew blurred in the background, focused and intent, but the focus was unmistakably on me, the light hitting just right to highlight my determined expression. Beneath the photo, the caption read, "Raina Jefferson, Director of Silence, but the one who makes everything frame perfect." It wasn't just a tagline, it felt like a quiet nod to the ordeal, transforming my restraint into a badge of honor. Likes and comments flooded and almost immediately, industry peers sharing it, crew members from the shoot adding fire emojis and well-deserved. A few even tagged the assistant director, though he'd gone radio silent since Emma's dressing down. I leaned back on my couch, the city's night lights flickering through the window, and let the moment sink in. As a Black woman director in Hollywood, I'd always known silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy, a way to navigate spaces that weren't built for me. That poster wasn't just about one shoot, it was a testament to every time I'd been dismissed, every project where I'd had to prove my worth twice over. It echoed the Black stories I'd lived, real, touching tales of resilience beating injustice, where patience and proof dismantled biases brick by brick. The image lingered on my screen, a symbol of change, not dramatic, but profound. It reminded me why I persisted, not for the spotlight, but to pave paths for others like me, ensuring the next Black woman on set wouldn't face the same hurdles. In the quiet of my home, I smiled softly, saving the post. The words "frame perfect" weren't just about the shot, they were about rewriting the narrative, one silent stand at a time. And in that, I found my own perfect ending,